how did you get into the gaming industry?
So, like a lot of people, I grew up with games. It was my life. I was adopted into this kind of hyper-religious family in the South. And, so I find myself in Mississippi as a child. And the entire culture is about who's dating who and football and church. And, no disrespect to that culture. I'm just not into that stuff. The world of Mario and Final Fantasy was so much more interesting to me than the small kind of world of the South, the high school football team. My parents, for all their flaws, they did something really awesome with me. They funded any desire I ever had growing up. And part of this is because my father was a very successful entrepreneur. So, in the early 90s, when a decent computer cost $3,000, they would buy that for me every few years. They bought me a PlayStation 1 development kit back when they were hyper expensive and just totally give me the keys to learn whatever I wanted. So, I found myself as a very young adult, like starting my first startup at 19 with $250,000 and, really taking this programming background out into the world. It was 2010 and we could see the number of women gamers just exploding. In the Super Nintendo age, it was 3% of gamers were women. Then before the iPhone, it was up to 19%. And today we are 53% by many estimates. So I got so angry about women always being the damsel in distress, the hypersexualized, girlfriend, that I wanted to make a game studio that made different kinds of stories. It's a really great studio. We are one of the very few game studios that's majority women at our game studio. So, we kind of came up with this idea to mix two games together. Heavy Rain and Mass Effect. I'm a huge fan of Mass Effect. And I'll never forget here in Boston, like my first game dev meetups, I went up in front of the crowd and I'm like, this is what I'm trying to develop. And I remember kind of being looked up at the dude's like, yeah, sure, you can do that, Brianna Wu. And we did. We got, I believe it was 3 Game of the Year awards for the vanilla version of Revolution 60. Our special edition came out. Very proud of that. It's a lot of visual upgrades. So, yeah, very happy about the kind of games we put out.
And what was the most rewarding part for you?
I think just telling a story the way that I wanted to tell it. And, Rev 60 isn't a perfect game. I designed the characters back in 2010. And, my intersectional feminist awareness was a little bit lower. If I started again today, we'd probably desexualize the costumes even more, have more body type diversity, have more people of color in our cast. But, I think overall, what I'm so proud of is it's a game where every single role in the game is played by a woman. The villainess, the commander, the scientist, the sidekick, and the hero. And what I'm so proud of with that is, there's not this tokenism. And we have this real range of personalities and what everyone is. And when you play Revolution 60, there's never a shot that like lovingly frames their butt, like the camera's always on their face and the story is always about their emotion. And I don't think that happens very often, so I'm very proud of that.
What kind of advice would you give to young women looking to break into the gaming industry?
Sure. This is such a good question. I think the biggest thing I would say from the development side is this. There is a crisis of confidence with women in the game industry, and it breaks my heart because I see it every day. And I think the world we live in starts telling young girls, and then young women, that they can't do things really early on. It starts in the classroom where boys are called on more and girls are kind of put in these social roles where we compete with each other. So I've really never met a woman in the game industry that I think has an accurate portrayal of what her skill level is. It's really concerning to see it. So I guess my overall message would be believe in yourself. I mean, not to diss the guys in her field, but they're not as smart as they sometimes present themselves to be. So, go out there, try to get that promotion, believe in yourself, take big projects, At the same time, I would say this, there's a real generational difference right now that's going on in the game industry. In all respect to the women that are a little bit older than I am, I'm in my 30s, but there's a culture with that where there really used to being the only woman in the room. And they kind of have this competitive vibe sometimes that's just not healthy to be around. So my real message to you would be, look for other women in the field that will have your back, that will advocate for you, that will, really help you in back channel. Because if you don't have those structures, you're not going to succeed. Just one more thing on that. I am in a position of privilege, right? And it really frustrates me how many women close the door behind them when they get there. Sending an email to someone takes me 30 seconds. And, when I go and speak at colleges, I meet so many young women and, millennial women that don't have this kind of harmful one girl in the office attitude. It takes you nothing to call up your friends that work at EA or Activision and say, can you please look at this resume? It's 30 seconds. And we've got to do that for each other.
100%.
100%,
I'm all
yeah.
about that as
Yeah.
well. Totally.
Yep.
And what are you currently working on?
I am running for
There
Congress
you
here in
go.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I
Well,
am.
that's awesome. Congratulations on
Can I get real with you about this? It was so hard for me to make this decision because I have worked 80-hour weeks since 2010 building up my game studio. And we were in the middle of a huge expansion into VR and AR. In some ways, Revolution 60 was my line in the dirt telling the industry to take me seriously. Like, look, I can deliver a quality game. Look at this. This stuff works. And Revolution 60 was always about getting to the next project. And, here in 2017, I have really good connections in the game industry. I know a lot of venture capitalists. I know most of the power players in this field. And I was 100% ready on election night to come back to Boston and keep working on our studio expansion because we were working on some of the coolest Mass Effect technology you'll ever see, like stuff that really pushes this to the holodeck. And it was really hard for me to see the election results come in and to really feel a sense of helplessness about this. It was very similar to Gamergate where I got involved in Gamergate because the men in our field, the male journalists, were choosing very consciously not to report about all the women that were being bullied and threatened out of our field. We were hemorrhaging women in 2014. And I said to myself, if they're not going to do something, I am. And I really took the ball on that. And, very similarly with running for Congress, like with Donald Trump in the White House, I look at what's at stake and I look at the Democratic Party, which is my party, and I feel like we treat women's issues like a kind of boutique, like we'll get around to it when we can. Like women are a special interest group. And I don't see our rights being a priority for the Democratic Party. So, I am really scared about doing it, but I am running for Congress this year. I'm in the middle of raising $1.2 million, which I will need to compete, and I'm really excited. We're going to bring this startup mentality to Washington, and we're also going to bring a really unapologetic brand of feminism.
Awesome.
Yep.
Needed. Very needed.
Thank you. I appreciate that.